outside this country.
Sure.
And that comes from limited partners who say, we want our money back in 10 years and we want 15 to 25% IRR.
Sure. I mean, the problem with that particular view, which is to say 20 years, is what happens in the interim. So let's look at the Naxals problem in this country. The Naxalite movement used to have a footprint of about 9% of India. Current statistics say that the Naxalite movement has now got a footprint of about 33% of the country. Now there are entire areas in this country where there are perfectly decent investment opportunities, where your number one threat is the Naxalite movement. I mean in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, etc., where mineral-rich places, lot of private equity opportunities, but there is a Naxalite threat to the whole issue, right? So, and that to me is the danger, which is that if you, so I don't necessarily know who will plug the gap in between, but there needs to be a rising sort of acknowledgement of the fact that maybe we don't have the luxury of waiting for that sort of time horizon for inequality to get to the stage where real threats will emerge. I mean, according to the Prime Minister himself, I mean, this is the number one threat facing the country. It could actually tear the country apart.
Unfortunately, I can't disagree with you. I completely agree that that is a challenge. And I think the issue is that, given the current state of the Indian market and given the fact that there's only so much liquidity available globally, I think until people start to appreciate that it is a zero-sum game, I think a lot of investors only look at this part of it and say, hey, I can grow this piece. But until they realize that it's a zero-sum game and that if they don't fix the right-hand side of the page as well, eventually the left-hand side is going to get hurt. So I think, it's a reality that we need to address.
And also, just to sort of, Mudit, maybe you can step in on this. I mean, just to address, I really want to, address this Naxalite issue. Because if you, I think it's a safe assumption that most of us here are market friendly. Now, if you look at the Naxalite issue, one could actually make the argument that the Naxalites are actually providing a private market solution to what is fundamentally a law and order problem. Now, is that actually acceptable to us? It is actually the market has thrown out a solution, the Naxalite movement. Is that acceptable to us as citizens of this country?
Actually, just to put a perspective on what Ruben is saying, I have a friend who's working on the Naxalite movement. He's writing a thesis at Oxford University. And while discussing with him and visiting him with him in fields and asking people, it's interesting, today that we have entrepreneurs, that actually Naxalites are very successful entrepreneurs. And the biggest service they're providing to the society is of actually settling disputes among individuals within a society. And for that they collect taxes and they provide protection for the jobs people do. And also if a dispute emerges, which is contract enforcement, which is one of the big fundamental issue in any business, they essentially ensure that all contracts are actually honored. And just to give you a little bit of a story, there's a guy, I was told by a banker, whom I'm not going to mention these banks, he's operating in a Naxalite district. And he told me that in the Naxalite district, the branch manager would never go because of the threat to his life. So how does one do business? The assistant branch manager actually started taking the role of a branch manager, and he started making loans to the farmers. Now when he made the loans, it became a scandal because an assistant branch manager cannot make loans to the farmers or to the people out there. And the reason why it became a scandal was because there was a drought in that area and people started defaulting. So the issue was how were loans made in the first place. And because that guy was an honest guy, every Naxalite in that area recognized that guy, that he was honestly working for the society. The leadership themselves went and collected all the loans, all the defaulted loans. They pulled up all the money they had, they collected and repaid the loan to the bank. We're talking about a nationalized bank. Now that's Naxalism. Now they have provided a solution to recover the loan. There was no bloodshed, nothing. Farmers repaid the loan. And now the situation is, the assistant branch manager who's actually been able to do business in a low-income area, the bank faces a situation where it says, should that guy be expelled or should he not be expelled? I mean, he's gone beyond his duty of fault. Now that's a market solution for you. And I think, Ruben, if you ask me honestly, it seems quite efficient. But the situation is, this country can break apart if we have such market solutions. Imagine for every individual contract enforcement, you raise a private army. Now that to me, I think as a citizen is not acceptable. But at the same time as a citizen, we have to ask ourselves a question. that yes, today when we have to get our work done at the government, we can pay a bit of a money, even perhaps we can bribe the judiciary and get away with it. But that system itself is actually crippling to a large extent the economy, because a large part of the budget outlay of the government, which does affect every fund manager who's worried about inflation and budget deficit, it's spent on dealing with these issues. And that is why, in my view, these two economies get connected. Any time the government decides to spend 60,000 crores on a bailout, has to affect every individual. I mean, maybe we are immune to inflation because we have investment opportunities, but it will come back to us. I mean, in the stock market, we have seen a 70% decline in valuation of all the people who have invested in the stock market. Why has it happened? There, I think we have to discuss all these, I think the macroeconomic issues are played, and that's where the interconnectedness is. But such market solutions, in my view, are very powerful. I am a strong believer in the market, but I definitely think that as a citizen of this country, these solutions might actually break the country, even though they provide a solution to a problem like that.
May I jump in here with a comment? See, I'm a market economist, and I really appreciate what the market can deliver, and if there are government failures, the market steps in. But I think that we need to recognize that the government has a job to do, and if it is failing on the job, then we need to figure out why it is failing on the job. If there have been some reforms and liberalization of the economy, but that liberalization and reforms do not actually touch the lives of the average people. And that is because there has been no reform in the governance of the country. In a recent news article, I saw that the poor pay a very large percentage of their income in bribes to get services, even government services. So I was talking to Professor Bardhan, who's an economist at UC Berkeley, and he made this case that, see, all the reforms that have happened till now have not been directed towards the lower socioeconomic segment of the population, because the lower segment of the population actually deals with the police and local government officials and all that, and those reforms have to take place in those institutions, so that the average person feels that yes, there is some change that has happened. My life has become a little easier. He's not harassed in his small business. He's not harassed. Otherwise, he sees that everybody else is doing well and his life hasn't changed. So reform itself has to be more inclusive, not just the growth part of it.
So just to follow up on that, I mean, why do you think that has been the case? I mean, why has it been lopsided, the reform process? I mean, is it again a case of low-hanging fruit, which is that it's politically more expedient and more easy, come up with a certain set of reforms and not with another set of reforms? Is that the reason why it's lopsided?
Yeah, because the reforms anyway, the post-1991 reforms were actually imposed on the country. It was not like a voluntary move that was made by the government at that time. But once that, say, the balance of payment, external balance of payment problem had been solved, there is okay, we have done enough, and there's no point in letting go of any more power, because it's a question of power. The government has power, and it has created over actually more than a century, a system which extracts resources from the people. It collects rents, and it doesn't want to let go of that nice little racket that it has. And I think that for real reform, which will affect the 800 million, there has to be some leadership we have a leadership problem, in my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in?
I would like to add, you look at the recent response of the government to the stock market crash. The government calls a meeting and decides that it will put in a lot of liquidity to, minimize whatever the downside risk is. Now let me tell you, from the economics point of view, where this money is coming from. The government will either print this money, most likely it will, but at some point in time it's going to increase the taxes on it. Printing money in simple economic terms means that there's going to be inflation. Now, inflation is